Good morning, good afternoon, good evening. My name is Authentic Young, or Authie, whichever one you prefer. Today's vlog is about ghost stories. They're ghost stories that I've experienced as I was growing up, and I want to share those with you guys. I don't necessarily believe in ghosts. I have a very logical science side that feels like there's an explanation for everything. And then I have this other side where I have these experiences that make me wonder, well, what the heck was that? So I kind of ride the middle when it comes to this kind of stuff, but regardless, these experiences did happen to me. So I'm going to share them with you, and they were terrifying. Some of them were very terrifying. So let me just set the stage a little bit. So most of the things that happened to me, honestly, I would say all of the scary things that happened to me were in my best friend's house when I was growing up. She lived in a very old house. Like, it was built in the late 1700s. It was like it was made out of literal stones. The part of it, because it was like an old postal house back in the late 1700s to early 1800s. And then I think in the late 1800s, they added on another section where they added a second living room, a den, I guess you'd call it, and the kitchen. And the kitchen was also very old. Like, it actually had a fireplace in it that people used to cook on. That's why I think it was from the 1800s. And then again in like the 80s, there was another whole section that was added on, and that was like another, like a suite, but like a for her parents' suite, I guess you would call it. So I will do the layout of her house to give you guys an idea of what you have going on. So you go up to the front of the house, you pull into the driveway, and you walk along the sidewalk. You go to the front of the house, and you're walking in into the kitchen. And in the kitchen, like I said, it had a very 80s to 90s vibe, but it definitely had very old school stuff in there. So that's why I think it was probably added on in the 1800s. And then you go to the left, and there's that den that was also added at the same time. And then you go to the next room, and that's the oldest part of the house. And that was the living room. And in between the den and the living room was stairs that went upstairs. And that's where her bedroom was, and her brother's bedroom, and a third bedroom. But the third bedroom was more like a closet. Nowadays, it would be smaller than a walk-in closet. It was very small. So there were 3 bedrooms up there, and they were very small bedrooms. I have a little bit of a cold. And so come back to the beginning. You're in the kitchen again. Instead of taking a left when you walk in, you can go straight, and you go back into like this middle lounge area that's kind of like a hallway / you can sit down and chill. And that also has a door that goes out back. There's also a bathroom there, and then it goes into the parents' suite area. If you walk outside right there, you walk, I would say, oh gosh, maybe 500 feet, and there was a barn. It was a very small barn, and they had 3 horse stalls. They had 2 horses on each end, and then the center stall had like the feed and the hay, and then there was a little garage attached to it too. Also, behind that, there was a whole bunch of land where we would do like some 4-wheeling, and we had a fort there, and we would do like, just regular games and stuff until we got to like, I would say we're about 15 to 16, and our parents built an in-ground pool there. So you'll see these stories progress, and they're at different phases. And also in that area, there was 3 unmarked graves. Don't really know what they were, but they were in the ground. They were almost like slabs. They were clearly just graves of some sort, right where the pool was built at a later date. And there was a huge tree. The tree was like a very old, majestic, scary-ish kind of tree. And they owned about 60 acres. And the horses had, I'd say, about 10 of those acres. And then behind that, you would go 4-wheeling, and there was just like stories about those woods that were stories that would terrify like anyone. I don't know if our parents would tell us those stories when, like, to make us never go in the woods. There were some pretty scary stories. Actually, her parents didn't tell us any of the weird stories until we got older. A lot of the stories that we heard were basically from the other children in the neighborhood. So the street was like a very old street. The street itself also had scary stories that would happen on it about like people being hung on these trees and just like these horrible stories. There was a pit that was like kitty corner from our house. We called it the Gravel Pit, and it was made out of gravel other than when it rained. Then it turned into like some kind of pool. And there were a lot of like scary stories. There was a story across the street used to be like farmland, and then over the years one house was built and then 3 houses. Then it turned into like a little mini development. And when the very first time I went over there, it was still farmland, and there was one shed that was kind of off in the distance. And the only story I'd ever heard was there was an old man that used to live in that shed, and he passed away. It was like the scariest story I'd ever heard before I went to our house. And then we had the boys that lived down the street. They played D&D. That's another whole story, but we did play D&D with them. And each house was probably, I would say, everyone had about an acre, except for they were on one whole side of the street. So they had like the 60 acres. And then everyone that was kind of across the street had about an acre. So it was pretty spread out. Like there wasn't a lot of traffic, not a lot of people, not a lot of things going on. So we're going to start from the very beginning. And the very beginning is I met my friend Missy in 2nd grade. And so that's where I would hear some of the stories. She had heard stories of like, and they're just like little kid stories. Ooh, there's a spooky like thing that happened. Or there were nothing like big, but her first time having people over and having something happen was in the 3rd grade. She had a big 3rd grade birthday party, and there were about 13 of us girls there. And it was right around like 6 or 7 p.m. It was just starting to get dark out. And I remember her parents were like, okay, to finish up the scavenger hunt, you guys can go outside, but you can't go outside unless you have a partner. So Missy and I were partners, and we went outside, and all the other girls also went out too, and they were partners. So we were all running around, and we run around the outside of her house. Before I keep going, let me tell you a little bit about the basement. So as I explained the house earlier, there was like the living room, and then the stairs that went up, and then there was the den and the kitchen. Well, in the den there was like this door that was it was like a closet door you'd open up, and then there were the stairs that went down. And it was the creepiest cellar you could possibly think of. Like, it was the original cellar to start with. And then on top of the creepiness of an original cellar from the 1700s, there was literally a dugout tunnel that would curve around to like her dad's work area. And then her dad's work area was fine. It just had things like saws and like, all the things that you would see in a horror movie. So that was in that one section, but you could actually open up that section so that section was like right below her parents' area of the house. And so you could open up those doors and step right outside. So he really didn't go through like the spooky part to get there. He really just went down, went to the back of the house, and that's how he got to his area. The spooky area was really like, you almost had to crawl through this area to get from one point to the other. And it was dark and wet, and you had to walk on these planks. And it was something straight out of a horror show. I don't even know why it was there. I don't even understand why there was a tunnel that went from one point to the other. But the point is that I just wanted to share the basement. So back to the story. So the first time we're in 3rd grade, we're running around the house, and we get to like right in front of the dad's like work area. And right at that point, there's like this little hill, and we're looking straight at where the stables are. And the horses are like kicking and making a ton of noise. And right in between the horses, there was like what appeared to be an old guy just rocking. I have never seen anything other than this one time. I mean, I've seen like almost like shadows and things, but never something so crystal clear. It was, when I say crystal clear, I mean I could clearly see that it was an old man, and he was rocking in a rocking chair, but it was extremely bright. It was almost like looking at a light bulb. It was kind of like he was just covered in all white, like it was just glowing. And Missy and I just grabbed each other's hands, stared at each other, and we just turned around and booked it the other way back into the house. And when we got in there, everyone was like, oh my gosh, did you guys see this? And the parents kind of just brushed it on the rug. They're like, oh no, just go back in the living room. Let's get some popcorn. Let's watch a movie. And we went in there, and we were just all like chilled. And and we were calm. There was like a couple more small things that happened that night that were kind of weird. Like we were in that living room, which happened to be kind of close to the stables, as it turns out. I mean, pretty close. I would say like if you looked out the window, it would be like 60 feet away you could see like the stables. And we were watching a movie, and there were like bangs that were happening on the window a couple of times, and we were freaking out. But her parents were there, and they were like, don't worry about it, it's nothing. So that was the first thing that stuck with me. So like third grade, that was third grade. Then we go through third grade. Fourth grade, we didn't do anything that was super scary, but by third and like when you're in third and fourth grade, you're starting to find like a little bit of interest in like spooky stories. So we were reading up on some stuff. We started to like look into like history about her house, and we were learning like about the neighborhood. Some weird things were happening. Like we would be eating dinner, and this happened like all the time. It was kind of crazy how often it happened. Like there would be like screaming and banging and almost like pleas for help coming from the vents. And her father, we could all just sit there and stare at each other at dinner, and her dad would be like, I'll check it out after dinner, like don't worry about it. And it was just one of those things that was just extremely weird, because it came like commonplace that would happen. You'd walk up the stairs and you'd hear bangs that you had no idea where the bangs came from. Up in the upstairs, in between her room and her brother's room, there was a door that you'd have to unlatch on both sides, and then you could open it and you could go between her and her brother's room, and it latched on both sides. So we started right around, I want to say 4th or 5th grade, we started talking to the door, because we were like, we had heard about Ouija boards. We never took one in her house though, because her parents forbid us to even bring a Ouija board in there. So we started talking to the door, and it would be like one crack was yes, 2 cracks were no. So we would ask it some pretty crazy questions like, has anyone died here? And it would say things that would freak us out, like yes. And we'd start asking these questions of like, well, how old was the person that died here? And the things that we kind of figured out was, according to the door, a lot of bad stuff actually happened on the street, not necessarily just the house, but apparently there was some kind of like war that was happening. And this is the kind of stuff that over the years we had like written down on a paper to try to figure out like what parts were true, what parts were not true. Well, anyway, the things that we had come up with is there was some kind of fight or small battle that had happened, and somebody had come through, and they were taking the people that lived in the area and like murdering them on the street. And I don't know how true it is. When we did look it up, we couldn't find much of anything other than it does seem like that there were graveyards in the area that were unmarked, and there's a lot of like not really sure what happened in this area type of vibe. So going forward, we were continuing to talk to the door, but we were starting to get a little bit bored of talking to the door. So we one night we were telling the door that we were kind of getting tired of talking to it, and we were gonna wrap it up for the night. And it had moved in such a way that it seemed like it still wanted to continue to talk to us. So we were like, yeah. So we like locked it all up, and I laid down on the bed. Well, my friend Missy was like, she got up to like shut off the light, and I heard like this cracking noise. It sounded like this horrible creaking that was happening. And I told her, Missy, you gotta turn on the light. And she's like, what is it? I'm like, I don't know what it is, but it's really close to my ear. You gotta turn the light. Like, it almost sounded like something was whispering in my ear, and it almost felt like something touched my hair. And then after the creaking stopped, this freezing cold thing grabbed my leg. In instant, like I normally would have like jumped up out of absolute fear, but I just froze. Like I did not move at all. And she I was like, turn on the light. And she turned on the light. And she had this armoire, and it had opened up to the point where if I would have sat up, it would have smacked me right in the eye or the head. Like it would have hit me. And at that point, I started to get like a little bit nervous about this kind of stuff, because I was like, well, I've never had something actively try to harm me when we were doing things, but I took it personal. I was like, I really felt like whatever we were talking to suddenly wanted to cause me harm. So that was when I brought it up to my mom, and I was like, I just wanted to talk to you about this because like, here's this thing that happened. I know it's kind of weird, and then my mom like opened up. She was like, she started telling me some like really crazy stuff that I won't get into. Maybe that'll be like a different one, but she would tell me things about how this kind of stuff followed her around when she was younger, and how my brother follows him around, and how it kind of manifests when people are in their early teens to mid-teens. It's kind of like the energy, all of this like really weird stuff that she had never talked to me about before. So I took that information and brought it to my friend. And I was like, well, this is what my mom says. And we're like, oh, that's interesting, whatever. And so now we're still like hanging out. We kind of stopped talking to the door at that age because we were getting into like 6th and 7th grade at this point. Things are still happening, like weird things are still happening left and right. So like one night I was spending the night there, and we were just like looking out her window, we're laughing and chatting, and this thing that I can only describe as a tumbleweed goes like rolling down the street. And as we look at it closer, this sounds absolutely terrifying and horrible, but it almost looked like Shadowmen, like all grouped up together in a huge tumbleweed that was rolling down the street into the gravel pit. Sounds super weird. I totally get that. Like, I still question what that is. I have no idea. It made the reason we looked out the windows because it was making this whooshing sound that came out of nowhere. And the fact that at first we thought maybe it was just some kind of like literal tumbleweed that was going down the street, but the way that it turned into the gravel pit made us not okay with that feeling. We decided at that point, because we turned on our adventure caps, we started calling ourselves the Grimes. We're like, let's go dig into the gravel pit and see what's going on there. We went around. Okay, so it was like we started to look at the area, and there was like a ton of dead animals around the area. It was actually kind of creepy. We don't know if like other people in the neighborhood were doing like really weird stuff, or if like when animals got to the gravel pit they passed away. Like the parents just found out when we went there, and they're like, that's enough, you guys aren't allowed over there anymore. Like, there are stories of like things happening over there that we don't want you guys like anywhere near. So we stopped going over there. It was creepy enough and weird enough that we just didn't want anything to do with it. So as I said, we were kind of getting into like age 13, 14, 15, and things are continuing to happen. Like one time we went downstairs. We had to like go downstairs to get like we wanted to get the game. Like, so you had a whole bunch of games downstairs. So we go down the stairs to where the games are. We go to turn on the lights, and the lights aren't working. Something, I kid you not, reached out and grabbed the bottom of my foot to the point that I couldn't move my foot. I was freaking. My friend had to like grab me and almost pull me back. Like, it was like, I never went down there again after that. I never ever went down there. Something like my ankle was trapped on that stairs, and like her parents even told us, they're like, don't worry about it. You guys don't have to go in the basement anymore. If there's anything that you need, we will go down in the basement. So we would play games in the dining room right there, or not the dining room, the den right there. And we would have like games laid out on the floor, and none of us wanted to sit next to that door, the basement door, because it was just freaky. And every time we would sit there, a gust of freezing cold air would come through. I mean, it was just like the Arctic was coming through. So it was super weird. It was just like this really weird place. Sometimes when we were feeling brave and we wanted to be like a little, let's get our spooks on or whatever. Let's like go get a little scared. Let's go play a game right next to that door. And then sometimes we're feeling like, okay, we're getting a little old for this. It's kind of weird that this stuff is still happening. But anyway, it was. And we ended up having, this was around the same time, she ended up having another sleepover. It was one of her birthday sleepovers. We were older. We were like I said before, we were like 13, 14 years old. And her parents were like, okay, you guys are old enough to take the 4-wheelers out, but you have to be back before dark. You have to be back. So she had 3 4-wheelers, and we took them out, and we were double riding. So I was actually riding on the back of hers, and we had some other friends, and they were riding, and we were going through the backwoods, and there was something back there that was big and chasing us. Like, we started to think that it was possibly a bear or some kind of like shadow creature. It was something that was freaking us out though. So we're just like back there doing our normal stuff. We're just going to go on a quick 4-wheeling ride, and we were starting to head back, and that's when it happened. We saw off in the distance, all of us saw it, and it started to like almost charge towards us. I mean, it was bigger. It feels like it was bigger than a grizzly bear. I mean, it was just huge, whatever it was. It kind of reminded me of whatever those tumbleweed things were. So we're like booking it on the four-wheelers and we're trying to get out. Well, one of the four-wheelers actually gets stuck. And so those were our friends that actually they had to start running back. So we're terrified. We're close there. We're almost out of the woods. And once we get out of the woods, we'll be in a field. So at least we'd be able to see the house. So two of us got out. The two that were still running were actually still running, and we're all there waiting for them to come out. Well, they started screaming. So we're like, we have to go back in there. So we turn around and we go back in, and the one of them's on the ground, and she was just, oh my gosh, she was terrified. We got back there. We actually put 3 people on each four-wheeler, and it was a tight squeeze, but we got out of there. And when we got back, she was crying, like she had to go home. She said that something grabbed her and dragged her down into the leaves, and you know, we didn't experience it. So we believed her because we all experienced whatever it was that was chasing us, but we didn't experience like being pulled down and into whatever it was. And again, like I said, you got to take all this with a grain of salt. She could have been running. This is my science logic side saying maybe she tripped on something. She felt like she got sucked down, but she never came back again, like ever. Like her parents came in. Her parents went and talked to my friend's parents for like a really long time. And then they left, and then we were like, okay, that was super weird. And then again, this happened during this time. And this happened periodically. We would just be sitting in the living room, and you'd hear like these like slight bangs up against kind of where like the shed was, kind of like these bangs up against the house that were, all you could describe it as is like a bear smacking against the back of the house. Like it just didn't make any sense. And it's not like we lived in an area where there were any bear sightings. There was never any bears, or we would have heard about the bears, and the parents would have been like, hey, there's some bears out there, so be careful. I'm not saying that there weren't bears, but never. I mean, I grew up in upstate New York, so there were bears, central New York, but not like, that wasn't like a common thing. So fast forward a little bit, I would say about a year or so, and like I said, these things are still going on. Like things are screaming from the basement. The parents are still shoo-shooing everything that we bring in under the rug. Things are falling off of, like, you'd just be walking by and a picture would fall off the wall, and you'd be like, well, that's kind of weird. That just fell there. Or you'd hear like weird knocks, or you'd just hear weird creaks that, you know, the parents would be like, don't worry about it, don't worry about it. So one of the bigger ones is we had gone to sleep. You know, we stayed up kind of late, and we got up kind of late in the morning. And so we had no idea like where her parents were, what was going on. But we were old enough, it didn't matter. I mean, we were probably like 14 or 15 at this point. So we go downstairs, and it's sunny, it's nice out, walk downstairs into the kitchen, and we're making cereal. And all of a sudden, like, we're just talking and laughing about like whatever was happening at school. And her brother, who was a couple years younger than her, started screaming from the basement. And he was like screaming help. And he's like, I can't get out of here. Please help me. Like the voice in him was like, seriously, something was hurting him in the basement, and it was just screaming through the vents. And we were like, we did not know what to do. I was like, I'm not going down in the basement, because the last time I stepped down there, something literally grabbed my foot to the point where I couldn't move, and my friend had to pull me up. So I'm like, we have to go next door and get the neighbors. I refuse to go into that basement. So we ran next door and got the neighbors' parents, and they were like, they're getting their jackets on, and they were rushing and stuff. They're like, okay, we're going to help your brother. And we cross the street, and we see the parents, like, we see the car coming up. And so the neighbors are like, well, let's just hold on a second. And we're like, but the brother. And they're like, well, your parents are here. Let's just hold on. So the parents pull in, and her brother jumps out of the back seat of the car. And we were like, what? Like, he's literally in the basement screaming right now. So the parents and the neighbors had like a really long talk. And we went inside, and the noise was like gone. There was no more noise. There was the regular screaming from the basement, but it wasn't her brother. So that was like the biggest one that freaked me out, because whatever it was down there was just literally trying to lure me and my friend down there with her brother's voice. So that one definitely freaked me out. So move on a little bit further. By this point, we are hanging out outside, and we're like the whole her pool was being built, so the whole area was being dug up out there. And again, we were like just hanging out outside. This was when it was like dusk out, and we heard like this whooshing sound again, and it looked like that shadow thing that looks like, but it was in the woods, so it was really hard to see. And it looked like Shadowmen all in like a dust field of it was just like a big circle, just whooshing around. We go back inside, and we're starting to feel like, we're almost 16 at this point, and we're feeling like, you know what? Let's sleep outside. Let's do it. Let's sleep out in the camper. Let's invite some friends over. Let's just like hang out, sleep out there. It'll be fun. We haven't been like spooked out in a while. Every year around fall time, we were like, let's do it. Let's do something a little crazy. So we invited a couple of girls over, and we had a slumber party. So we're out there, and that's what sparked it, was like, seeing that thing again. It's almost like it came around every so often. It wasn't necessarily Halloween either. It was just like every so often, like a weird thing would happen. It would spark our interest, and we'd be like, okay, well, let's see what's going on here. So we invite our friends over, and we're in there and just doing the normal 16-year-old stuff, like talking, texting, like hanging out, having a good time. Out of nowhere, we hear that crazy noise again. It's like a whooshing sound, and then it gets freezing cold inside of the camper. Like, we were all like, what the heck is happening? It just got freezing cold. We're like, well, let's get inside then. Obviously like a cold front just came through, so we're gonna actually head back inside. And we were in the driveway, so it's not like, oh, we're camping, so we're camping in the driveway. All of a sudden, a huge like bang up against the back of the side of the camper where the door is, and the whole thing like moves back. We start freaking out. We're like calling our parents. We don't know what to do. And the thing, it happens again a second time, and it feels like the whole camper is gonna go down. And as it whooshes, you can just feel like this freezing cold stuff that was happening. It was just like this gust of freezing cold. Well, we couldn't get a hold of our parents, so we had neighborhood boys that lived down the street. So we actually called them, and they started to come down, and they came down, and then they said that they saw something, but they can't explain what it was. But they explained it the same way we did, that it looked like tumbleweed, that literally looked like tumbleweed was hitting the side of the camper. But when they came over, it kind of dissipated. Like, I've never seen it dissipate, but they said that it all went into like 1,000 different directions. So they came over, we got out, we went inside. We're like, that's it, we're done. We're not camping outside ever again. We never did again. We were like, that's it, we're done with that. Like, I don't know what that was. It was like, and a whole bunch of us saw it. And that was the thing, when a whole bunch of us saw it, we had like something to talk about. We're like, what did you see? And what did it feel like? And when you have like this whole group that experiences something together, it really makes it clear that something happened. You might not know exactly what happened, but definitely something happened. So now it's like same time frame. We were like about 16 or so, and the pool's finished, and we were all outside, and we were just like, swimming, having a great time. It was like a pool day. There was like 6 of us or so, and I was getting a little tired. I'm like, you know what? I want to head inside. I'm thinking, so we were really into the Civil War at the time. So we were like doing a lot of research about it, and her parents told us about this show North and South. They're like, we have it on VHS, go ahead inside and watch it. So I was a season behind because it was at my friend's house, so I wasn't always at her house. And so anyway, I'm like, I'm going to go catch up on that while you guys are swimming, and then we'll meet up. And she was like, okay. Her mom was having friends over. Her mom had like 3 or 4 people in the kitchen. Like, it was just like this happy day. There was nothing weird about it. So I go into the living room, and again, if I can explain, like you walk through the kitchen, you go through the den area, and then you go past the stairs that go up to the top stairs where her bedroom is and her brother's bedroom, which is shut by a door, latched on both sides. And then you go into the living room and you lay down, and so the bedrooms are up above you. So I head before I go in there, I head into the kitchen, I grab some snacks, I talk to her mom for a bit, and then I go and I lay down and I start watching North and South. Well, I hear my friends upstairs like running between her room and her brother's room and laughing and having a great time. And I'm like, what the heck? Like, I was just outside with everyone. Did they climb up? So there used to be like a fire escape ladder outside of her brother's room where we'd practice like fire drills. And I'm like, did they take the ladder down and climb up that? Because that's really weird. Like, how did they get up there? But I didn't think anything of it. I'm like, whatever. And I remember cranking the TV but they were so loud up there. But I had turned it up as loud as I could, and I was just watching the whole episode. So about a half an hour or so goes by and they just would not be quiet. And they were like banging, and it was just so ridiculously loud with laughing and banging and pushing and just like, I had no idea what they were doing up there. So a half an hour to 45 minutes goes by. All my friends come in, through the den, and they walk by there and the noise just stops. And I'm like, holy crap. I'm like, seriously. I was just laying here watching and everything, the TV's super loud. I'm like, you guys, who's upstairs? Like, I thought you guys were upstairs. They were like, no, we were all outside. And of course, like, at that time, we all experienced all this stuff together. We all believed each other when we said stories, but it's different when you experience it together or when you experience it alone. So me telling the story, everyone's like, yeah, that's super weird, but let's rack it up as one of those, like, here's the weird thing that happened to you story, because that happened to a lot of us. So we go upstairs, and one of the weirdest things was the door was still latched shut. I'm getting goosebumps talking about this. And on my friend's bed, so when you would jump on my friend's bed, the bottom would pop out, and the bottom was popped out as if someone was jumping on the bed. So everyone was like, okay, that's definitely weird that those things are happening, because the door was latched shut. So clearly we weren't running through. There wasn't anything that was solid that was running up in there making all that noise. So that night I go home and I'm just hanging out, and my friend calls me and she's crying. Oh my gosh, she was hysterical. She's like, I don't know what to do. She was watching her brother, who was 2 years younger than her. So, he's not young. He's like 14 or so, and she's 16, and the dogs are going crazy, and she's in the living room, and she's like, I can hear it. And I could hear it. Like, I could hear it over the phone. There was like screaming and yelling, and this time it wasn't like a happy sound. It was more like someone's getting destroyed up there, like people are being chased, and it started to sound like it was coming down the stairs, and the stairs, I mean, you could see, but nothing was coming down the stairs. She's like, I don't know what to do. And I'm like, you have to go next door to the neighbors. And it was like the fact that I could hear it over the phone while it was happening, it was insane. So she ran next door, got the neighbors, they got back. And when the neighbors got back, they stayed in the house with her. When their parents came home, the parents had like this long talk with the neighbors. And then at that point, it was like a couple weeks later. And we were just about, I think we must have been late 16, maybe 17. We were right around that age, because it was in high school. Her parents sat us down and they were like, okay, look, we're leaving this house. We didn't want to tell you, but we're not going to say it's haunted, but there is definitely something that is not positive going on here. There's been a lot of things that happened to them. The mom had recently woken up with what she felt like hands on her neck, and that's when she snapped, and she's like, I can't live here anymore. She didn't tell us that part until everyone was moved out, but she told us about the parts where they would have parties over there, and they would be having drinks, and the drinks would just be knocked over. Or like they were having a party guest one time where they're all sitting in the living room, and like all 6 of the pictures that were on the walls all fell at the exact same time. And they had like these really, like, the things in the basement, they said that's not normal. I know we always said that was normal, that the screaming was coming from the basement, but that's not normal. It's not like a normal thing that happens in houses. So we tried to take care of that, but we never could figure out where it was coming from. So there were a lot of, they mentioned the thing that would ram up. They said that they had heard stories of people killing things in the woods, and seances happening in the woods, and like really weird stuff going down in the woods, but they didn't really believe it until the father went out four-wheeling with the son, late, like earlier that year or so. Apparently they had the same experience we did, where something chased them. So it was right after that whole thing went down with when I had mentioned that the girl felt like she was being pulled back, because after they had talked to their parents, the dad decided to like go out and check it out, and they experienced something very similar. So they had experienced a lot of things with that house as well. They just didn't want to share it with us. So the very last story I have of this house was the parents, the mom refused to go back there after that experience with her, when she said that, like, we learned this later on, but apparently something had taken the blankets off of her, and it was very cold, like up her arms, and then it went onto her neck, and she never wanted to be in the house again. She refused to just go back to the house. So the father, who was more logical and like science thinking, I guess, he was there with the kids because the kids still wanted to stay there. Like my friend and her brother were like, we don't care, we're gonna stay here, like whatever, it's haunted. So the dad was out of town on a business trip, and they were selling the house. The mom was at a hotel, and so they were selling the house, and the real estate lady was going to come over the next day. And my friend was staying there with her boyfriend, and they were staying in her parents' bedroom because the rest of the house was kind of emptied out. They had taken everything out, so all that was really left was they brought an air mattress. So they were just hanging out in that bedroom because the real estate agent was going to come early in the morning or something like that. So they were just hanging out there, and all of a sudden they heard that noise again, that like whooshing weird noise, and they saw this crazy shadow like go by one of the windows and then up against the side of the house there was banging. But she said, but this time it wasn't just like when we felt it against the camper, the whole camper moved and it was big, but this was like the whole side of the house, which was like 3 times the size as it was before. And it was just smashing and smashing. Like she thought the whole thing was going to come down. They called the police. The police came, like it stopped apparently, like I'd say, I think she said about 20 minutes or so before the police came, but during that time, for that hour or so that it took for her to make the phone call and for the police to come, she said the things that she saw like up against the sidewall, the feeling of freezing cold, that they like barely could even like stand the coldness, and like the banging up against the wall. She was frozen. She felt like she couldn't move, even though she's not that type of person. And I felt the same way when I was younger. I'm not the type of person that would freeze. So I thought that was weird when that thing grabbed my leg when I was younger and I froze. So yeah, she was terrified. After the police came and they checked around the house, there was nothing. There was no scratch on anything. There was like, she said the amount of banging that was happening should have like taken like half the house down, or like destroyed the door, or done something. But the fact that it did like absolutely nothing was so bizarre. So that was the last time. I've since Googled her house to see if the people that lived there afterwards had stories. And the only thing that I could find was people that lived there before her had stories of like seances that happened, or like things that would come floating up through the windows, like these really weird stories that didn't exactly happen to us, but they were also very weird stories. Also, the area is supposed to be one of the most haunted areas in central New York. And I can even share like the area with you guys. I'll put that down in the links down there of like the area that she lived in, so you guys can get an idea. It wasn't just her house. It was literally the area is one of the spookiest areas in upstate New York. Well, it's not really upstate, it's central New York. So now that I have goosebumps, I hope you guys enjoyed the stories. Again, they were super weird. Like I don't necessarily believe in ghosts. And these are things that happened to me as I was growing up. And you know how when you tell stories over and over, you do wonder like how much of it gets exaggerated, how much do you remember? But every time I hang out with my friend again and we talk about these stories, we remember it vividly together. And we're like, oh my gosh, yes, you remember this, you remember this. And when she describes the stuff, I'm like, yes, that's exactly what I remember. Like it's really interesting that we end up, when we do get together, to sit down and talk about these things, and just we're still blown away at the whole experience. And her parents still kind of they don't really talk to us about it much. We don't bring it up with them too much. I would like to one of these days, but the last time we visited, when we bring it up, they kind of change subjects relatively quick. I think that they might, now that I'm older, I think that maybe they feel bad that they didn't leave sooner. Like they might feel a little bit of guilt of like keeping their family in a situation that they might have felt like it was dangerous. That's the only thing that my friend and I have talked about, and that we think might be the reason they won't talk about it. Or some stuff went down and they're not willing to share like what went down. It could be both. Like I don't know. Those are the theories that we have. So that is my spooky stories for 2023. I would love to hear, I mean, they happened well before 2023, but I would love to hear your spooky stories. If you have any, please share them with me either here or in Discord. I'll probably open up the spooky story section again in Discord. I had it last year and I had some pretty good stories in there that I would like to share on here, but I'd have to get everyone's okay to do it. But you can definitely read them over in Discord. I'll open that back up again so you guys can see it. And please share your stories. I would love to hear them. And if you want to follow on, I'm also a streamer, also do YouTube videos. I have all my links down there. Feel free to follow or anything. Mention what was I going to say? Like, you can just tell me about your stories is all I was going to say. Mention some stories that you've had. I'm all like, I'm sweaty and I've got like goosebumps from the stories. Okay, I think that's it though, guys. Well, have a very happy Halloween. I hope you enjoyed the spooky stories that I had to share from my childhood. And thank you so much for watching. I really appreciate you guys spending the time to listen to my stories. And I hope to see you out in the verse or any other game that I might be playing at the time. Hope to see you out there, and I will talk to everyone soon. Bye.